Ghost of Harrenhal, my name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 114 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 40 of A Clash of Kings, that's Daenerys 3.
As always, we're going to chat about the chapter and try not to spoil any future plot points for you. And hopefully, we'll provide you with some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some relevant news and listener correspondence. Be sure to check out the show notes, they'll provide additional information about the characters and geography of this chapter, particularly helpful if you're not reading along. How are you, Mackelly?
I am doing well. I've been out enjoying this beautiful weather we have today. How about you?
We have beautiful weather today.
We do. It's mid-October here in the southeastern United States, and our weather has finally dipped under the mid-80s for the at least for the next week. So
yesterday, for Celsius people, it was 31 Celsius, and today the high is 19 Celsius. So it was a distinct change.
Well, of course, I was doing my yard work during the early part of that.
Yes. Interestingly, I played soccer yesterday, and I scored an important goal.
Ooh, all right.
We were losing 3-2, and a late goal tied it 3-3. And as soon as I scored that goal, the heavens opened. It felt very portentous.
Yes. Of course they did. They were just waiting for that goal.
Mm-hmm. One thing that cracked me up this week was you pinged me about merchandise and what we could put on our merchandise, and you were suggesting we could put our in-jokes on the merchandise.
Right, yes.
And so we went back and forth reminding ourselves of the in-jokes.
Yes.
Including me not being able to remember what the in-jokes were, which was itself an in-joke.
Right. And then we decided...
And then you said, let's talk about this
right.
on the podcast. I was like, so we're going to talk about the in-jokes. We're going to talk about talking about the in-jokes on the podcast. I'm like, we are disappearing into a spiral of despair.
Yes, we're getting close to being able to roll out some merch, which is exciting. Woo-hoo. So all those of you who have asked, hopefully... We've been taking on the challenges of it one at a time, and it's taken only about 11 months to get to this point.
Yeah. We're so motivated by profit. You know?
Yes, but we're very close. We're at the point now where I'm literally trying to design merch on the merch website. So we're getting dangerously close. And of course. Okay. I don't know what I'm doing, so I might get to the next step and realize, oh, I did this all wrong. I got to redo it. But I think we're getting close.
Mackelly, just as a reminder, winter is coming.
It is. As is the holiday season.
Right. That's really what I meant.
Yes. Yeah. So, hey, if you have any good ideas on slogans from the show that we could throw on some merch, let us know. I thought of one while I was walking the dog earlier. Let's get down to business.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Because that's next on the hit list, right?
It is, yes. Very next thing you're about to say, as soon as we're done babbling here. Oh, one other thing. I know you are not very frequently on the social medias, so I don't know if you saw what I posted this past week. So I will show you in case you haven't. You know, my birthday was recent.
That I remember.
Yes, it was coming.
I don't need the social media for that.
Right. Well, one of our listeners, one of our favorite listeners, Jenny of Old Stones, the fearless leader of our Discord server, she sent me this hand-drawn card with Hodor on it, wearing a birthday hat.
That is awesome.
It is awesome. And on the inside
is
a birthday cake.
And it says
Hodor. So, yes, I plastered that all over the social medias, but I don't know if you had gotten to see it. I know you and your wife share a Facebook account, and one of you liked it.
Whoa. My wife has a Facebook account.
Yes.
If I am forced... kicking and screaming to look at Facebook, I use her account.
That is
I would not
more
say
accurate
we share
description.
An account.
Yes,
that is not the same thing. But I will have a look at that because that looked terrific. Thank you,
Yes.
Jenny. That's very kind.
Yes, thank
Well,
you, Jenny.
It was a gift for Mackelly, but I liked it a lot.
Yes, thank you. I've thanked her both over message, and I thanked her on the social medias, and I'm thanking her now on the show. That was very cool. Probably the coolest card I've ever gotten in my life. So,
Well, let's get down to business.
yes.
How did we leave Daenerys Targaryen? It's been a while since we saw Dany. I think it's 13 chapters, did we count? Since we
I
last
believe
saw
so,
her?
yeah.
Last we saw her, she was riding into the city of Qarth to much fanfare. She was being squabbled over by Pyat Pri the warlock and Xaro Xhoan Daxos, the wealthy businessman,
Right.
with promises of lavish gifts and great knowledge. All she really wanted was ships and soldiers. She met with a ship captain who told her of Robert Baratheon's death. The news lifted her spirits and increased her desire to get back to Westeros. All right, Mackelly, why don't we give them the summary of this one?
All right. Another long summary coming up, so get comfy. Dany and Xaro Xhoan Daxos ride together in a palanquin from the Hall of 1,000 Thrones. Dany has just met with the Pureborn, a faction of men whose ancestry dates back to Qarth's ancient kings and queens. Xaro can tell immediately that things did not go well for Dany at the meeting. She did and said all the right things, but to no avail. The Pureborn will not help Dany win back the Iron Throne by providing ships and men for her effort.
I do notice that in the summary, when you have to say Xaro Xhoan Daxos, you just write XXD. When I say it, you write it out because you know I'll forget what his name is if I try to just wing it.
You picked up on that. I deliberately did do that for your
Yes,
for your
I know,
sake.
I can tell. And honestly, while I'm making a joke of it, I am grateful. So, Xaro Xhoan Daxos helped guide her through wearing the right attire, paying the proper sacrifices, and bribing the appropriate people. She's earned a good deal of gold and other treasures while in Qarth, Xaro having set up a pay-to-see situation with Dany and her dragons. Anyone, great or small, who wants to see the dragons has to first offer up a token to Dany. It was these gifts that she sold to earn the money to offer the bribes.
Dany considers sending Ser Jorah to reclaim the bribe money, since it was so ineffectual. But Xaro says if she does, she'll likely end up dead by a member of an assassin group known as the Sorrowful Men. In the end, Dany felt like nothing more than a sideshow for the Pureborn. They were bored and she was something new and different. But Dany is not to be deterred, despite Xaro's best efforts to convince her to give up her quest for the Iron Throne.
The Pureborn aren't the only players in town, so Dany considers going to one of the groups of merchant princes, the Ancient Guild of Spicers, the Tourmaline Brotherhood, and the 13, to which Xaro belongs. The groups vie with each other as well as with the Pureborn for dominance in the city. Xaro casually dismisses the idea. The first two, the Spicers and the Tourmaline Brotherhood, are nothing but dissemblers, braggarts, and pirates. The 13 might give her ships, but she won't find anyone to occupy them. Qarthine soldiers and sailors couldn't care less about her claim to the Iron Throne.
When she then ponders the idea of going to Pyat Pri and the warlocks, this gets Xaro's attention. He sharply denounces the warlocks as liars who eat dust, drink shadows, and have nothing to offer. Dany reminds Xaro that she wouldn't need the warlocks' help if he'd give her the ships and the men she needs. He reminds her that he's already lavished her with gifts since she's arrived at his palace, including the very ebony and gold palanquin that they're riding in. She retorts that they aren't the gifts she wanted. And Xaro adds his heart as something else that he has given her.
Dany finds Xaro's proclamations of love amusing. He's flowery with his prose of love and lust, however his actions sing a different tune. Whereas Ser Jorah tried in vain not to stare at her bare breast, left exposed by the style of dress made popular in Qarth, Xaro hadn't even noticed. She's also not missed the scantily clad beautiful boys that fill Xaro's palace.
Their conversation is interrupted when the palanquin comes to an unexpected halt. Jogo tells her it's due to a large crowd around a fire mage and pulls Dany up onto his horse to see. The fire mage is conjuring a ladder of fire in the air. Dany and Jogo notice that while the ladder grows taller and taller, child thieves relieve the distracted members of the crowd of their purses. The fire mage eventually climbs the ladder and disappears when he reaches the top.
Quaithe appears from the crowd and tells Dany that it's Dany's presence that allowed the fire mage to perform such advanced magic. Prior to her and her dragon's arrival, the man could scarcely wake fire from dragonglass and stuck to more common tricks like walking across hot coals to distract the crowd while his pickpockets did their work.
Of course.
Quaithe warns Dany that she needs to leave Qarth.
It's because I misspelled Quaithe the whole way through this.
Yeah. Quaithe warns Dany that she needs to leave Qarth soon before she's not permitted to do so.
Dany questions where she should go, to which Quaithe responds, to go north, you must journey south. To reach west, you must go east. To go forward, you must go back. And to touch the light, you must pass beneath the shadow. Dany assumes Quaithe means Ashae, and wonders what she'll find there if she were to go. Truth, is Quaithe's answer, before disappearing into the crowd again.
Back in her chambers in Xaro's palace, Dany tells Ser Jorah that he was right. The Pureborn rejected her plea for help. When talk turns to Xaro, she tells Jorah that Xaro asked her to marry him again. Jorah knows why. It has little to do with love or lust and more to do with a little Qarthine marriage custom. On the day of their marriage, a husband and wife can ask the other for one token of love from their worldly possessions, which cannot be denied.
Jorah points out, much in How Mullen fashion, that one ship wouldn't help Dany's cause much, but with one dragon, Xaro can rule the city. Dany ruminates on this news while telling Jorah of the events in the street and Quaithe's warning. Jorah is all for leaving Qarth, but not for Ashae. He wants to go even further east to keep Dany away from those who might do her harm.
Dany prefers to go west towards Westeros, possibly to Illyrio Mopatis for help and shelter, as she and Viserys did before. She knows Illyrio is rich, maybe he can hire her the swords and ships she needs to reclaim the throne. Jorah points out that she can't roll into Westeros with a foreign force and expect to be welcomed and supported by the people. If anything, it'll unite the currently fractured realm. Dany decides that tomorrow Jorah will go to Pyat Pri.
Oh. Much to the chagrin of Xaro.
Yes, that will be. I mean, we don't know that.
Right. But...
So, actually, you wrote this summary, and it's well played, sir.
Thank you.
I'm proud of your efforts here. But you actually, at the very last line of this chapter was confusing to me. She's telling Jorah to go to Pyat Pri. I read it the other way round.
It's not clear. Yeah, it's definitely not clear because it doesn't say someone said. Right,
but by English grammar, it is her saying it to him. I just didn't think it made as much sense. But I couldn't believe Jorah would say it to her.
Right, exactly, yes. Right. And so I based it off of which voice Roy Dotrice used in the audiobook. He used Dany's voice, so I was like, okay, I'm going with Dany on this.
Right, because when the speaker changes, you have a new paragraph. So in the written book, it isn't a new paragraph, so it's still Dany speaking. So right. What you've got is correct, but I couldn't quite parse it, and it didn't make sense either way. I mean, I thought surely it's Dany that needs to go see Pyat Pri. Why would he care about Jorah? But the alternative of Jorah saying, you know what we should do? We should go and dabble with warlocks.
Right. Does not seem like fitting for something for Jorah to say. I think she's saying, you go set this up. Like, I want you to set up a meeting for me.
I actually had a third interpretation, which was she was talking to her dragon. She has a dragon on her shoulder during this. And I thought, it's time for you to go and see Pyat Pri. I literally thought that. I was like, well, maybe.
Who's talking to whom here?
Exactly. Maybe it was the dragon. Oh my God, you can talk.
Your first words are go see Pyat Pri. What does this mean? I think it was like a have my people talk to your people type situation.
Right. So Dany is living the fine life after the privations of the Red Waste, and that's got to feel good. I mean, she led a difficult childhood, but it was always somewhat pampered. I mean, they may have been beggar prince and princess, but they were prince and princess, you know. Right.
Yes, they did. I mean, I'm sure there were gap moments when they were probably living on the streets and stuff, but they did. Beg and flatter. I think Dany mentions in this chapter that Viserys would have to beg and flatter people to take them in and take care of them for a while. But, it's funny that like you said, she is living the finer life here. She's got a lot of luxury and opulence around her, but she also thinks to herself that maybe she should return to Vase Teloro, which is the city of bones where they hung out until Pyat Pri and Xaro and Quaithe were brought to them. And she considers that giving up. She considers that like quitting on her task. But there's a little bit of merit to it. She can't really move too far forward until the dragons are grown enough to be of use anyway. Right now, they're basically... they can open some doors for her because they're unique, like her getting her visit with the Pureborn. But they're also major liabilities because, as Quaithe said last Dany chapter, everyone who sees them is going to be jealous and want them.
Right.
So it also puts a target on her. So maybe going somewhere sheltered and hiding out for a few years while these dragons grow wouldn't be the worst idea.
Yeah. I wonder... I mean, I'm not sure if Vase Teloro is the right spot for that. I mean, it's
might not be
desolate. It's going to be hard. I mean, the dragons to grow will need a lot of food, presumably.
That is an issue. There's probably not a ton of a dragon-type food in the Red Waste.
Right. Presumably it's some sort of livestock that they'll most like to eat. And,
right.
There's not a ton of it. But actually, we'll get into quite a lot of this, I think. Because for me, a lot of this chapter is kind of... It's kind of a fun chapter in the sort of... giving us the politics of Qarth and sort of seeing all of these different groups who could vie for her attention and all this kind of thing. But it's not really going anywhere. You know, she's sort of like pulled in all these different directions, none of whom seem like they want to give her what she wants. And so there is that kind of like, she should probably abandon this city in favor of something else or give up. I mean, like you said, it would feel like giving up to marry Xaro, for instance, but it would be a step towards what she wants. Now, maybe this custom makes this a non-starter for her because she can't lose a dragon. She doesn't want to lose a dragon.
Right.
But if he said, I'll give you what you want if you marry me, then that's pretty good. And what we'll do in the meantime is we'll stay here in Qarth, growing fat on all this food and opulence. You know?
Right. Maybe she'll decide she doesn't even want the Iron Throne at that point.
Right. Exactly. You know?
Yes, I think you're right. I think the point of this chapter is that she's not going to get what she wants in Qarth. Pretty much even if she's willing to give more than she wants to give. I just don't think anybody in Qarth is going to give her what she wants. But
is that just Qarth, though? I mean, isn't this going to be the same everywhere? I mean, what does she have to offer? She's going to say, look, I'm going to be the Queen of Westeros. It would be good to have me as a friend. If I get over there and win it, then I will make you glad you chose to help me.
Right. A lot of if, ands, thens, and buts there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it feels like it's not just Qarth. It's wherever you go, you'll be met with the same skepticism and hesitancy.
Yeah, especially this far east in Essos. You need to find someone who's got a vested interest, like possibly Illyrio. We know Illyrio and Varys have been discussing something to do with putting a Targaryen back on the throne. Right. So, anyway,
we know that, but Dany doesn't know that.
Right. Yes, she doesn't. Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's buying a stock low in hopes that it will rise, and then there's buying a stock that you have absolutely no interest in how high it rises, unless it rises to a point that would be almost unattainable.
And the problem with this particular stock is, even buying low will take an awful lot.
Yes, it's very expensive. Yes.
And soldiers, and it's extremely expensive to buy this cheap stock.
Right, that's a good point. That was, I think, the analogy I was looking for right there.
and yeah, I mean, she'll reward you many times over if she's successful. But for her to be successful, you're going to have to provide her an awful lot.
Yes, high buy-in to reach that benefit. Well, we finished the conclusion, so now let's...
Yeah. But she does mention that she has no clue how to train in dragons. I mean, just being blood of the dragon doesn't actually tell you how to train them or, care for them.
Right. I think we maybe mentioned this in the chapter where the dragons hatched. Is like, did they come with a book of how to train your
Right.
dragon? Did Jorah provide that in his wedding gift of books for her? I think that might have been what we
But I
mentioned.
mean, she seems to be doing okay. She said, I think in this chapter she mentions that they've doubled in weight, so they're heading in the right
Raised
direction.
to Laurel. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. But she also thinks it's going to take several years before they're of any real use to her. So
Right. So what do you do? I mean, yeah, okay. I'm getting ahead of myself here in this discussion, but so she's wearing the traditional Qartheen dress, and she does that because Xaro says that the Pureborn are never going to listen to a Dothraki.
right.
But he's kind of misread the Pureborn on this. They are always going to listen to her because she's got dragons. They are wealthy and aristocracy and lazy and dying for something new to be presented in front of them. They were always going to listen to her.
Yeah, you got a good point there. They probably, she couldn't have done any worse had she come in her Dothraki garb,
right?
Because she got like 0 votes. So
right,
so
and her bribes went nowhere.
Right, but there is. I think the reason he says this is because there is some bad ancient history between the Qartheen and the Dothraki. Because after the fall of Valyria, I think this was mentioned in a background chapter, maybe toward the end of A Game of Thrones. But anyway, after the fall of Valyria, the Dothraki ventured southeast and destroyed all of the Kothi cities, which is what the Qartheen are, their ancestry is from, the Kothi people. And one of those cities, of course, being Vaes Teloro, which is where Dany was earlier. The only Kothi city that they did not destroy was Qarth, because of the huge walls and the lack of appetite for sieging that the Dothraki have.
Yeah, and of course, yeah, you make a good point. When she's dressed up like this, it's easier to see her Valyrian blood. You know, she's the purple eyes, the silver hair stand out when you're not scruffy and dirty.
Right. And showing that, of course, not only does it show I've from the blood of old Valyria, but it also distanced her from any bad blood with the Dothraki.
But again, she got absolutely nowhere, so she could have not bothered with all this. And that's where Xaro perhaps misread.
Yeah. In fact, she thinks it did nothing. I might as well have shown up naked.
Yeah.
Maybe I should have shown up naked.
Yeah. So she's weighing up all these other options, you know, between so the politics of Qarth is you have the Pureborn, who are these, you know, landed gentry of Qarth. Then you have the Spices, the Tourmaline Brotherhood, the 13. And it's not crystal clear exactly what these... I mean, the Spices obviously are spice traders. The Tourmaline Brotherhood are gem merchants.
Maybe.
I guess.
Possibly, yeah.
And then the 13, it doesn't say what they are exactly, but they're obviously... They seem like they're the wealthiest merchants, is what it feels like.
Possibly.
Of a more general case. And then you've got the warlocks. What are they called? Forgotten their name.
The Undying Ones.
The Undying Ones. Oh, I missed that. And then you've got the Undying Ones, who, you know, are also a force of power in this city. But it feels like none of them have none of them have much control over the others. It feels like power is dispersed amongst all these groups, and so none of them have ultimate rulership.
Right.
So,
very much so. It's very different than Westeros, where you could go into King's Landing like Jalabar Zo did, the Summer Islander, he was a deposed prince, and he went to Robert Baratheon, the king of Westeros, and said, "I need your help." She doesn't have the luxury of going to one person to make her plea.
But then she does have more chances of a yes.
Also true. Yes.
But it doesn't seem that she does have much chance. It just feels like none of them can really offer her what she wants, or at least none of them seem willing to offer. It feels like quite a few of them have the resources to offer what she wants, but none of them are willing to take this big of a risk on a teenage girl who happens to have some weird pets.
You're right, and she also seems to misconstrue merchant ships with warships, because she keeps asking Xaro for his ships, and he keeps telling her, "I don't have warships, I have trading ships." And of course, he's rich enough. He could buy warships or have them commissioned or whatever. But he says, I've told you multiple times, I'm not a maker of war. War is bad for trade. And she said, I didn't ask you to take up a sword. Just lend me your ships. But there's a difference between a trading galley and a warship.
It sort of depends what she intends to do, of course, because if she's going to take a force large enough to win Westeros, to Westeros with her, she probably does need warships, because she needs to control the sea. But if she's just going to go to Westeros and build consensus amongst the lords and bring people to her, you could do that on a merchant ship.
You're right.
Do that on one merchant ship.
You're right. If that's the way she went about it. But I think now that Robert's dead, she has this desire to make it all happen very quickly. She wants to go try and take the throne now. Which, if she knew how much turmoil the realm was in, she might realize she really could take it right now.
Right. Yeah.
At least take King's Landing with not a whole lot of effort, because we all know Stannis is gonna wait her out. He'll be still waiting around by the time she goes from Qarth all the way to King's Landing.
He'll still be besieging Storm's End. So the Pureborn said no. They bribed 3 men who didn't really come through on their bribes, and this is why she threatens. She wants to send Jorah around to get her bribes back.
Right.
The 3 men she bribed were Mathos, who said nothing at all, Wendello, who praised the way she spoke, and Egon Emerus, the Exquisite. He said no, but he wept. And Xaro talks about how weeping is the done thing in Qarth.
Right, it's the cool thing to do.
He actually thinks she should have wept for the Pureborn, because that would have actually helped her cause. But again, I think there was never anything that would have helped her cause. No. They just wanted to see the dragons.
I don't think tears were the answer here. Now, we presume that Xaro told her who to bribe. You'd think he would be like, you need to bribe these particular people, not just bribe any of them. So did he know it was going to amount to nothing? Did he make sure it amounted to nothing? Because it's certainly in his best interest for her to fail. It makes her more dependent on him.
Good point. And also he has helped her to gain money by sort of arranging these visits where she gets paid. So then maybe it makes sense for him to then make sure she blows that money so she doesn't start to build up her own wealth and get out of here off her own dime.
He was watching all this wealth come in, and he was like, how can I get rid of all of her money?
Yeah. So she wants to send Jorah to get the money back, but Xaro says that what will happen is the sorrowful men, who are this band of assassins, will come to kill her.
Yeah, I gotta say, I like these Pureborn, like, so this is what they do. They like take bribes, and then they don't do anything with the bribe. And then if you ask, oh, hey, since you didn't hold up your end of the bargain, I want my money back. And they're like, no, we're going to kill you for wanting your money back. I mean, that's some nerve right there.
As a British person, I'm acutely aware of how the royal family operates. So no surprises to me.
Yeah. And then also, very early in the chapter, she takes off this necklace or something that's around her neck. And Xaro told her to wear it because he said it will prevent her from being poisoned, because these Pureborn are known for poisoning the wine of people that they feel are dangerous. And on Westeros, that would be a major violation of the guest rights.
Good point. But also, that was used to make another point here, that they didn't even offer her a cup of water when she visited the Pureborn. They offered her nothing at all. So she really did get short shrift from them.
Yeah, they didn't even try to poison me. That's how little they cared about me.
Yeah. So what can Dany do? I mean, Xaro keeps lavishing her with quite ridiculous gifts, including the palanquin that they're riding in.
Right.
She could just continue to fleece him and buy her own army, but as you just pointed out, maybe he's keeping a careful tally of what she's got and making sure she doesn't get to the point where she's independent.
Right. I think he's playing the long game here.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure that he would be nearly as generous as he is if she had no dragon to offer him.
Yeah.
If she was just Daenerys Targaryen with no dragons.
Yeah. And he'd made the point to her when he was sort of like asking her to marry him. We heard about this when she talks to Jorah later, that he'd said, look, the rules of Qarth are that the married couple, they keep their own belongings. It's not like a merging of the two. You know, the dragons don't become mine, they will still be yours. But he conveniently omitted the one exception to that, which is on the wedding day you get to ask for one thing that can't be refused.
Right. He glossed over that detail. Yeah.
Which goes to his true motives, clearly.
Right, exactly. I think that's a very key indicator of what his true motives are here. Yeah. And now she thinks she'd be lost without Xaro, because she said, he's the one that's been helping her set up the pay-to-see situation with the dragon and helping her, with who to bribe and how to get her audience with the 13. But I wondered if it's entirely true that she'd be lost without Xaro, or is he distracting her and trying to get her content with all the gold and all the gifts and the opulence and the luxury?
Yeah, I think there are others who would take his place.
Yes, certainly. But yeah, I guess that's my point, is she could rely on a lot of different... He just got there first, A lot of different people probably would sign up for this job.
But it feels like, with the rules of Qarth as they are, you'd always be in the same boat. You'd always be in that boat of, they'll court you for the dragons, you'll say no to giving them dragons, they'll say, it's not much of a deal to give you the ships you want. They'll say, hey, do you want to marry me? And you'll say, no, because you'll steal one of my dragons.
Right, yes. So it's quite the catch-22 here in Qarth. Right. He points out something you were just talking about earlier, so she says, if everyone in the 13 would just give me 10 ships, he says, you'll have 130 ships, but you'll have no crew, because the justice of your cause means nothing to the common people of Qarth. They couldn't care less. So, I mean, you can't really blame Xaro for not wanting to help her.
Right.
It's quite, like you said, it's quite the investment. High investment for potential payoff on the other side of the world.
But Essos, as a continent, is known for sellswords. So you could, if you had the money that Xaro claims he has, you could actually populate those 130 ships with well-trained sellswords. Right. And then you've got an invading army plenty big enough to take Westeros.
Yeah, of course, you go back to what Jorah said at the end of this chapter, when he said, you can't just roll up to Westeros with an army that can't even speak the common tongue and expect the people to back you and rally behind you. So, if she had a big enough force, they would eventually back her if they realize they were going to lose.
there's sort of like a graph here where it starts, they won't care because you're so small. Now they're going to fight you because you've got so small. Now you've got so big that they're not going to fight you.
Right. Yes. There's definitely a bell curve situation there.
Yeah. But so she sold all the gifts she got from all of these, from the sideshow that Xaro turned her into. She sold all these gifts to get the money for the bribes. The only gift she kept was a crown that the Tourmaline Brotherhood had made for her, which had 3 dragons on it, which was kind of like a cool crown for her, but she said it was very heavy. But she has kept that because Viserys was forced to sell his crown when he was the Beggar King, and this is one of the ways he got the name the Beggar King.
Right.
And so she's determined not to fall into that. Yeah. But as she talks about this, we get her view on how hard life must have been for Viserys being in that situation, and you do feel a little bit of sympathy for it. She herself says she can feel the pain it must cause, and she could see herself falling into the bitterness and anger that Viserys succumbed to.
Absolutely. I felt like this was much needed background on Viserys. It really humanized him a good bit. Because up to this point, when we actually were meeting Viserys, he just felt like such a flat character, just a petulant jerk with delusions of grandeur. And this is still rather vague, but at least we get what he's we start to get an idea of what he's gone through from a little boy up until his death. And you can start to understand how he ended up where he ended up. I mean, if you stack it all up, he lost his family, his homeland, his wealth, his station in life, all at age of like 7 or 10 or something really young. That takes its toll. And then he's just like left in this other continent, and he has to raise this little sister on top of it all. That's enough to make anyone snap.
And he never had the exposed breast and the 3 dragons with which to woo the people,
Exactly. He only had his last name.
Right. Yeah.
So there's a couple of there's just a couple little details here that I wanted to point out in case you'd forgotten what they meant. So she mentions Jogo using his silver-handled whip that, as she put it, that she had given him. She gave him that when she asked him to be her blood rider. And of course, he took the whip and then refused to be her blood rider. So maybe this is an Esaucy thing, not just necessarily a Qarthine thing of taking gifts and then not doing what the point of the gift was for. But we know how that played out. He's now turned the corner. But also, they're talking about wine, and Xaro wants her to go off around the Jade Sea and find this really amazing vintage of wine. And she says, the best wine comes from the Arbor. And then she remembers that Lord Redwine, who is the Lord of the Arbor, fought on her father's side until the very end. He was one of the few men that stuck with the Daenerys Targaryen until it was all over, basically. And Paxter Redwine was, as we know, heavily involved in the siege of Storm's End that trapped Stannis and Renly in there almost to their demise. So that's what those things were in reference to.
Yeah. So Dany threatens to go and see the other merchants, but Xaro just waves that off. The merchants can't help any more than he... Well, they could help as much as he would, but they're not going to either.
Right.
She threatens to go to Pyat Pri, and that does get a reaction from him. He says that blue lips speak only lies.
Yeah. Either he's telling the truth, which is possible. I mean, we're finding out in Qarth, not everything is as it appears. And he's just trying to protect Dany. Or he's afraid that they're going to dispel something that he's been feeding her, that he doesn't want her to realize is false.
Or, I mean, similar to what you just said, they're actually going to give her what she wants.
Oh, true. Yeah, it's possible.
I mean, that maybe is why he's trying to prevent this, because maybe they are the one group who would do this. Perhaps. I think we're going to mention this in a little while, but just at this point in the story, we see the fire mage building the fire ladder into the sky. Yeah. And Quaithe, when Quaithe intercepts Dany at that point while Dany's watching, and she talks to her, Quaithe says, this fire mage didn't used to be able to do things like this. He was, just an amateur. The best he could do was walk through hot coals. Now he's doing something spectacular. I mean, he climbed a ladder of fire and disappeared when he got to the top, as did the ladder, which is
40-foot ladder.
Right.
Like
that's some magic right there.
It is.
And Quaithe says that's because of the dragons. The dragons have turned him from a amateur pickpocket prestidigitator into someone who's got genuine magic up his sleeve. And so perhaps the warlocks are going to say, oh boy, we'll go to the ends of the earth with you, Dany, because you've got something that turns us from where we used to be to where we've always dreamed of being,
Right, absolutely. Yeah, I was thinking about the relationship between the dragons and the magic as well. I didn't factor in the warlocks. That's a good point. Yeah, I was thinking about... So she's saying that, well, I guess is she saying that the magic is increasing because of the dragons, or are the dragons around? Did they hatch because magic is increasing? The presence of it is increasing.
Right. There's a chicken and egg thing. There's a chicken and egg thing there. But I think Quaithe definitely seems to suggest that the dragons are the sort of fulcrum, because it felt like she was saying, since you came to town with those dragons, he's gained these additional powers. And so
Yeah,
that could definitely lead the warlocks to, first of all, be the one group who maybe don't want to steal the dragons from her, but actually sort of like actually tie themselves to her. We'll come with you. We'll go to the ends of the earth with you. And she may not even need the dragons then. The power that they might achieve just by being around the dragons might be enough to get her the thrones.
You're right. I had not thought about that possibility. Now, I was wondering if there's a relationship between this fire magic, the fire mage and his fiery ladder, and the dragons. If there's a relationship between that increasing and the stirring of the others, the fire and the ice.
Oh.
The two equal and opposite forces are equally, increasing their presence in the world.
Very good.
But, so we mentioned this in the summary. Quaithe rattles off a riddle here about what day. So she tells Dany, you need to leave this city before you aren't able to leave at all. And she says, well, where should I go? And Quaithe says, to go north, you must go south. To reach west, go east. To go forward, you must go back. And to touch the light, you must pass beneath the shadow. Now, of course, the west seems pretty obvious. She wants to go west to reclaim the Iron Throne. That seems, at least at first look, that seems pretty obvious. So in order to do that, she must first go east. And Dany assumes that Quaithe means Ashae. And since Quaithe doesn't say wrong when she suggests this, it seems like that possibly is what she's indicating. Then the south to go north thing, a wiki of Ice and Fire suggests that this means what she means by all this right here with the directions is to go southeast, meaning Ashae, in order to go northwest, meaning Westeros. But I was thinking of it as maybe when you get to Westeros, you must first do something in the south in order to go north. That's the order that it needs to be done. You either need to take the Iron Throne first or make some sort of pact with Dorne or something before you go north to fight the others, because it seems like maybe that's what's building as a fire and ice situation here.
Yeah. Keep going. I'm hanging on your every word here.
Now, the go forward and must go back thing, that I don't know. To me, that feels like before she leaves Essos, she has to deal with something in her past.
Right.
Which
I like this, Mackelly. What could it be, Mackelly?
Well, most logically, it would be the Dothraki, right? Possibly Khal Draco take his Khalasar and make it part of her force or something.
Uh-huh.
And then, or possibly something in the Free Cities, maybe with Illyrio. That would go back even further. Maybe she does have to meet up with Illyrio, or go back even further to Dragonstone where she was born. Maybe she needs to go all the way to Dragonstone, and that's where she'll launch her attack from.
Maybe it's all of these things.
Maybe, yeah.
She needs to build a new Khalasar, she needs to work with Illyrio Mopatis, and she needs to go to Dragonstone, yeah.
Right. Now, the touch the light to pass beneath the shadow, I mean, there's the obvious connection to Ashae there because the city is literally called Ashae by the shadow. And Bran did see shadows stirring Bran did see dragons stirring in the east beyond Ashae in that dream he had, the very first prophetic type dream, crow dream that he had. So maybe there's some connection there. And of course, all of her whole riddle might literally just mean, just don't take the obvious direct path.
Right,
Think outside the box, explore your options. You don't always have to go in the exact direction that it looks like you need to go in.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. It could just mean that. I'm not. But those were my thoughts about it. Some of that stuff I look around the internet to see what people thought. Some of that I got off a wiki of Ice and Fire, and some I pulled out of my own head. If you can believe that.
Thankfully, your head. So Quaithe is still giving cryptic warnings. Back in Dany 2, she said, "Beware, all that come to see the dragons will leave jealous." which is clearly true. Everybody is jealous of these dragons. Well, I'm not sure. I mean, I think the small folk are paying a couple of coins just to stare at the dragons. The small folk are probably like, whew, wouldn't want to deal with that thing as it gets bigger, you know?
Right, yeah. Yeah, it's unsure right now what the Pureborn really thought of her and her dragon, because they didn't try to woo her in any way.
Right.
Maybe that's intentional. Maybe they're like, if we shun her, she'll come back and be willing to bargain with us further.
Yeah.
But so, yeah, Dany was unsure of Quaithe when she first met her, because she remembered Mirri Mazdor, who studied under a Shadowbinder, which Quaithe appears to be. She wears the red lacquer mask that signifies a Shadowbinder of Ashae. And so...
To be fair to the Shadowbinders, they didn't tell Mirri Mazdor to kill Khal Drogo.
If you ever come across a cow, here's how you handle it.
They gave her the skills, she used them as she chose, you know.
But being that she didn't trust her all that much to begin with, you wonder if she would take her advice and travel the wrong way to Ashae here. So,
yeah. We did mention last chapter that Quaithe seems to be the one who's trying to help Dany. I would say... Well, she doesn't seem to be actively trying to pry a dragon away from Dany.
Right.
But perhaps she's just playing a longer game, you know, sort of trying to win Dany's trust. Maybe if Dany agrees to come to Ashae, then she loses all three dragons somehow.
Right.
You know?
Exactly. It certainly appears she's not trying to woo her in any way like Xaro is, and she's not offering her things like wisdom and stuff that Pyat Pri was offering her. So on the surface, it seems like she's just trying to help Dany. But you're right; she could be playing a game that just takes a little longer to set up, a little more subtle.
So Dany's got, you know, she's got to think about what her next move is. She doesn't seem to be content to stay in Qarth and marry Xaro. She is talking about going back into the Red Waste to live in a desolate, empty city, which doesn't sound great. She doesn't really want to go to Ashae with Quaithe. It is a good time to hit Westeros. She doesn't know all that we know, of course, but there is turmoil. There are large factions who do not know who to support.
Right.
The Tyrells, for example. The Martells, for another. Perhaps the Arryns.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Lysa Arryn is trying to stay out of things, but the Vale or Dawn would be a very good place to raise your dragons, in fact.
Yeah, right.
Because they're isolated, self-contained, semi-autonomous, not affiliated. These are good places to raise dragons. And defensible. If someone said, we need to go there and kill those dragons before they grow, they would find it difficult.
Got to get past the bloody gate before you can get into the Vale. Yeah.
So... going to Westeros now with a small force feels to me like an option. Like we said, if she takes a large enough force, she'll draw attention and resistance. If she takes a massive force, she'll draw attention and capitulation. If she goes now quietly, she could get in and make friends with people.
Which is important. Goes back to what Jorah says. You can't just roll in there with a foreign army.
Yeah. The question for me is, to do this, she probably would need some emissary in Westeros to lay the groundwork for her. And she may have one, but she doesn't know of one. Right. The one we think she may have is Varys. Because we know Varys and Illyrio Mopatis were plotting to put a Targaryen back on the throne. But she doesn't know.
And neither does Jorah, because Jorah didn't in any way seem to indicate that Varys and Illyrio was setting the stage for her reemergence. In fact, he said the opposite. He thinks that Illyrio only has his own agenda, whatever works best for him, for the Targaryen, for Viserys.
But to be fair to Illyrio, if he's supporting the Targaryens, then his agenda is to get the Targaryens on the throne, because that's how it pays off.
Right. That's the part that Jorah doesn't seem to get, is he might have his own agenda, but his own agenda is to put her on the throne.
Right, so. Which is also her agenda, so...
Yeah. You know, we heard back in Ario 3 of A Game of Thrones when they were in the dungeon, Varys and Illyrio were talking of the instability coming too soon. Possibly meaning the dragons hadn't hatched yet. Now, here they both agree. Jorah and Dany both agree that there is no way Illyrio would have parted with those eggs if he had any idea that those things were going to hatch into dragons.
He would have sat on them himself.
Right. Jorah says nothing knits together a broken realm like an invading army on its soil, which is very true in most situations. But we know that there's, with all the turmoil in the realm, that there's beginning to be this reminiscing about the last true king that's growing in Westeros. Even Brienne, just last chapter, which was the cat chapter, I believe, she mentioned that Stannis is not the true king, that that Jaime killed the true king and Robert killed his son. And we've heard others mumble and grumble and quietly talk about the Targaryens being the true king. So there is some growing Targaryen allegiance on a quiet level here.
So one idea I had was it might be the affordable thing to do might be to get a ship to Pentos, because they're a long way from Pentos here, and easiest route is by ship, which would get her Khalasar used to sea travel, which is one of the obstacles we've mentioned before, is they don't travel by boat, and so getting them used to the idea of traveling by boat might help. Hook back up with Illyrio Mopatis. She probably feels a debt to him for the dragon eggs, but we don't know if that makes him trustworthy. But from Pentos, she could build a bridgehead back into Westeros. So then the thing about being in Pentos is you're a lot closer to Westeros. You could actually go back and forth a little bit. Sort of go over there, make friends, come back again, build your army, go back, make more friends. It could be something.
You could even, especially being that both the Vale and Dorne are coastal areas, you could send Jorah to the Vale, or to Dorne and start laying some groundwork.
Absolutely, yeah. And to be honest, if you're wavering on who to support, Dany and her dragons feel like a good one to support.
That's true. If you look at those dragons and can imagine what they're going to look like in 5 years.
Right. But the thing is, striking quickly feels good for Dany. If you want Dany to win, it feels like a good idea to strike quickly, because right now there are significant waverers. The Tyrells in particular are a significant waverer. In a few months' time, they're going to have to choose. And if they don't even know of her existence, they ain't choosing her.
Good point. Yep.
They can't stay out of this war forever. They've chosen sides once and things have kind of like blown up on them. So they're going to choose another side soon enough.
Yeah. And with the Tyrells could also possibly come the Red Wines.
Right. And of course, the Red Wines, that's your fleet.
Exactly. That's where I was going with that. Right.
Yeah, that's your fleet. That can bring you and whatever sellswords and people you've drawn to yourself, all of you can come over in one fell swoop.
You could even do that on the sly. The Red Wines don't have to engage. They could swing around to Essos, pick them up, drop them off in the Vale.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Cersei would never have to know that they were involved.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, she could definitely draw banners to her. And basically, if you agree to her cause now while the dragons are small, you get the highest reward when she takes the throne. If you agree to come to her side when the dragons are full grown and staring you in the face, she forgives you, but you get less. And if you
get
still
to
don't
not
agree,
die,
you get fried.
Right.
So there's only 3 groups, really. All right, do you have some background?
I do have a little bit of background. So Xaro tells Dany that there's a saying that it's easier to milk the stone cow of Pharos than to wring gold from the pureborn. Now, Dany thinks to herself she doesn't know where Pharos is, but thought that there were certainly a lot of stone cows in Qarth. Well, luckily, we do know where Pharos is. Pharos is a city on the island of Great Morak, and Great Morak is actually the largest island in the known world. It's located just south of Qarth. In fact, it's the northern tip of Great Morak that nearly meets up with Qarth to create the Straits of Qarth, which is where the Qartheen get most of their money from, controlling that strait, because you can't get into the Jade Sea without it. The island pretty much separates the Summer Sea on its western coast from the Jade Sea to its east. And the northern half of Great Morak is a mixture of plains and hills and small forests, while the southern half of the island is densely forested. Now, Pharos, the city, it sits at the mouth of a river on the northern stretch of its western coast. And at the southern point of Great Morak is the city of Port Morak on the Cinnamon Strait, which is the opposite strait from the Straits of Qarth.
You know, your this background, when you wrote this and I read it, it got me interested. What is the difference between an island and a continent? Because I was like, Essos is way bigger than Great Morak, you know?
Yeah, I guess they haven't found the eastern edge of Essos yet.
Well, for what they've found, it's already way bigger than Great Morak. It's not like it's going to get smaller if they find more. But the point is that a continent is the major landmass of a continental plate.
Oh,
an
okay.
island is not that. So an island
Right.
so Great Morak is the largest island. You're not wrong. But I was curious about what the distinction was.
Yeah. Distinction between because you're right. Yeah, Australia, continent or island.
Right. That's a continent because it is
Right.
the large landmass on a continental plate. Okay. Anyway, sorry, I digress. So, comparison with the television show, Xaro does not seem into young boys in the television show. He seems definitely to have real eyes for Dany. This chapter is sort of like twisted. You don't see this. They're not in the palanquin. What you see more is set pieces in the homes of the wealthy. So the ancient guild of spicers that gets mentioned here in the book is basically subsumed into a single character known as the Spice King. He's very wealthy, but he rebuffs Dany, and they have a long conversation back and forth about, you know, he's in it for profit. He doesn't see the benefits of what she's offering. You know, the risks outweigh the rewards. He admires her passion, but he doesn't see lending her ships as a sound investment.
Okay.
So Jorah is the one who interacts with Quaithe, and she intuits that he loves Dany. So
wow, she really went way out there.
but that's hard when she's just talking to him. I mean, like,
right.
Unless every time he says Dany, he goes,
his eyelids flitter.
There's no sense that the magic in the world is increased by the presence of the dragons. That's lost in the TV show, as far as I can tell. There's no mention of Qarthian wedding traditions. Dany rebuffs Xaro just on principle. She basically says, I'm still married to Khal Drogo. There is a major departure with the book coming, but it falls slightly between this and the next Dany chapter. So rather than sort of spoil, I'm going to wait for the next. I mean, it's a significant departure, so it's not really a book spoiler.
Right.
But it leads to what happens in the next chapter a little bit. So I'll hold off on that. I'll probably forget by the time we get to the next Dany chapter, but
I'll try and remind you if I can remember. The Pureborn, they don't sit on the fancy, extremely opulent chairs. Do they?
No, the Pureborn don't really exist in the TV show. It's just the 13. I mean, the 13.
Oh, okay.
Everything is. I mean, so the Spice King is one of the 13. So they just simplify everything in Qarth down to.
Sure.
And I think Quaithe is one of the 13, and Pyat Pri is one of the 13. So it's just
Tyrion's there for some reason.
there's just 13 people in Qarth.
Rickon showed up.
I didn't have any pedantry. I because not an awful lot's happening in this. You know, it's a lot of lists of goodies that she's received and the people of Qarth. So I didn't get any pedantry here.
Yeah, no, I didn't either. One thing I just remembered that I wanted to mention because I didn't pick up on it like the first 6 times through the chapter. It wasn't until my very last time through the chapter. I wondered why Jogo says the milkmen are ignoring this fire mage.
Oh, how did you miss this?
And it was only
because
foreigners.
They know that that's where the pickpockets were.
I wondered, why does he say that? What is his point with that? It wasn't until like 6 times through the chapter that I was like, oh, they're all foreigners that are being pickpocketed.
Everybody watching the fire mage is from out of town. Yeah, exactly. There's
it has nothing to do with pedantry. I just remembered that...
I told you about when I went to China and I was in Tiananmen Square, and the people in Tiananmen Square were really staring at me. You know, I mean, I don't look Chinese, so I wasn't too surprised at people, but I was quite surprised by how like people were sort of agog at me. I was like, surely they've seen Westerners before, kind of thing. And I talked to a Chinese person about it, and they said, oh, if you were in Tiananmen Square, they were probably all from the countryside. They were all tourists coming in from the countryside, and you were a novelty. They said people from Beijing, yeah, they wouldn't even think of it.
Oh.
But the people in Tiananmen Square are tourists, and they would be.
Oh.
I picked every one of their pockets.
That's where the story ties back in.
News and notes, what do you got?
News and notes. Well, the Folio Society has released a 2-volume edition of A Feast for Crows. Both books have slipcases and contain amazing artwork by Jonathan Burton. The volumes have 12 full-page and 4 double-page spreads of really beautiful... I watched a video of showing some of them, really beautiful color illustrations. There's 17 illustrated chapter openers and 18 illustrated house sigils. And Volume 2 has 18 family trees as well that are really neatly done. And then Burton also created unique chapter opener motifs for each POV character. So, and if you buy the books, it's a 2-volume set, look inside the slipcovers for a cool artistic surprise in there. And you can buy these Folio Society, you can buy these books from the Folio Society's website. They're not cheap. At the moment, they're listed at $215 American dollars, but they are absolutely beautiful. And, holidays are coming, so.
Wow. That is not cheap.
No, it's not. And speaking of
holidays,
holidays,
will be a lot more cost effective. Yeah.
Yes. If you want to buy something for the holidays, it's not $215. Keep an eye on our social medias for announcements on our merch rolling out.
So we got a review from Killer129. Said, fantastic, really good podcast. The hosts do a great job of piquing my interest. That's our goal. Thank you, Killer129. Appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
So conclusions. Dany's comfortable again, in a way that she hasn't been since Pentos. But just as then, she is a bauble for the wealthy and powerful to squabble over. Only now it's not just because of her beauty and her bloodline, it's also her dragons.
Yes, she's got more to offer nowadays.
Right.
The 3 dragons. Qarth, to me, feels kind of like a gilded cage.
Yeah.
Especially Xaro is trying to distract her with this opulence and luxury, but also to confine her and use her for her these resources, which are her dragons.
And certainly Quaithe either believes that or wants to plant the seed of that, because she says, leave soon or you'll never be permitted to leave,
Right. Yeah.
But the thing that Dany really doesn't know, although she might intuit it from some of the news she's hearing, Westeros is vulnerable right now. And she has
more so than it has been in her whole life, basically.
Exactly. Right now would be a great time for her to swing into the theater of what's going on in Westeros.
Yeah, and as we know, the war is causing some longing thoughts of the previous Targaryen rule. So that might work in her favor. Yeah.
She has many of the ingredients that she'll need, but the Qarthians are driving hard bargains, and she's just not getting help here. We've mentioned before that we thought the Tyrells were too fat and too happy to really engage in war, but it seems to be even more true of the Qartheen.
Yes, exactly. That was... when I read this chapter, I remember you saying the Tyrells shouldn't get involved in this war on Westeros because they should be too fat and happy. And I thought, these folks really epitomize fat and happy.
Right.
Don't want to get involved in war.
Especially because it's not even their land. I mean, the Tyrells do have a vested interest in who sits the Iron Throne. These people really don't.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. On the far side of the world, there's really almost no benefit to them. It would take such a long game. I just remembered
a piece of pedantry, actually. Jorah says, let's not go to Ashai, let's go east. But Ashai is east.
I mean,
he said it as if it was a contrast, but I was like, dude, that's the direction. And I didn't really understand it because there isn't much between Qarth and Ashai, really.
No, I wondered about Jorah. Is he just wanting her to keep going out more desolate area because he thinks it's the safest place for her to just let's just get you out of where anybody will ever know who you are? Or does he just not want her to make connections and keep her just to himself, so that he is her primary touchstone. But
that's a reason to doubt him. Yeah, I hadn't really thought of that, but yeah, it's
because sometimes his advice is just, I don't want you near anybody. I don't want you to talk to anyone. I don't want you to go talk to the 13. They're going to reject you. I don't want you to talk to Xaro. Now, he's right in a lot of instances.
Right.
But how much of it is really looking out for her best interests, and how much of it is, I want to be your person. I don't want you to make other connections.
Yeah. But Dany makes the point that she believes her destiny is still tied to the comet, and the comet led them to Qarth, and she thinks it must be for some reason.
Right.
So maybe something's going to happen, but it's hard to predict. Anyway, we've gone over. Let's draw this one to a conclusion. As always, you can reach us at ghost.harrenhall@gmail.com, and you can follow us on Twitter at ghostharrenhall. We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Discord.
And if you would please go out and leave us a 5-star rate and a glowing review, it really would mean so much to us. We love reading those reviews, and it's a great way to interact with us. And it really helps other people to decide to give us a try, and that also helps us out a great deal. So if you please go do that, we will try and read your review on a future episode.
Definitely. Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.